Going on, everybody? It's Brent0331. Appreciate everybody tuning. This is live stream 41. And the topic of the hour is national divorce. Is it even possible? Should we do it? I don't know. We're discussing this tonight, kicking around the table. But right now, I'm going to turn it over to Les because this is actually his topic that he came up with. Going around the horn, go ahead and introduce yourself. And then Les, please introduce this topic a little bit more thoroughly so we're all on the same page. And then at the very end of your introduction, I want each person to say whether they think this even is a remote possibility. So, Les, you got the con.
All right. Yeah, this topic kind of caught my imagination. A couple of months ago, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene was doing an interview with Tim Pool, and she threw out the idea that, hey, look, we're very polarized in America right now, and neither side's going to give an inch. And, maybe before things get stupid and things get bad, why don't we just agree to disagree? We have irreconcilable difference, and let's go our own way. Blue states can be blue states, red states can be red states. Each side do their own thing and go live peacefully but apart. Avoid the Civil War, the whole thing. And I've read a lot up on it since then, and there's an appeal to the idea. My personal opinion is that I don't think it'll work because just like in real divorces, and we've all had friends that have done it, you all have the one that goes smoothly, but more often than not, there's a lot of messy stuff out there. And I can think of three things that would make it nearly impossible, but I'll save that for the main discussion and go ahead and turn it over to Bruce.
Yeah, so hey fellas, so I'm glad that Brent decided to do this topic tonight because it's something that I've been thinking about a little bit myself, and much like Les, we'll get into that as the live stream goes on. But there has certainly been a lot of sentiment. Really, I mean, my whole life of a sort of a separation of the two ideas because they may be growing apart. Those who are sort of lean towards being very progressive, I guess is the word we can use, and those who lean towards being very conservative. And those ideas have grown farther and farther apart, particularly in like the last 15 years. You've probably seen it more than anything, maybe just the last 10 years. But I'm looking forward to having the discussion. I'm glad all you guys are here. It should be a good one. And I'm sure like all of them, I'll learn something.
Yeah, I'm not sure national divorce is such a great solution. One of the primary reasons for this is political polarization at this point is not best represented as a state versus state conflict. It's more or less rural versus urban. Now that isn't to say there aren't rural communities that lean blue or even suburbs that lean red, but you look at places like Vermont, which is nearly all rural and all blue except for one county, at least in the 2020 election. Southern California and New Mexico have large rural communities that are blue. But speaking in generalities, it's city versus rural. So if states break apart and essentially you have large swaths of population that are sitting behind enemy lines, so to speak, I'm not sure how this would work. I admit I don't have a solution to this. Maybe breaking up some larger states or redrawing state boundaries altogether. Who knows? The problem now is that the federal government has become so large that it seems every 2 or every 4 years, it's a struggle for power to win the executive or the legislative branches, so the winners can cram down their worldview on the losers. So I think either way, reducing the size of the federal government is a better solution. That way, if for example, the Democrats win, it won't affect red America that much and vice versa. I also think that maybe, and Doc, I'm going to throw you a bone here, libertarianism may be a solution here, but national divorce, I think, will probably end up in civil war anyway. Like Les said, I've been through a divorce myself. It's never a good thing, and when you have two wealthy parties going at it, they're going to vie for the resources. So, but hopefully during this conversation, we can come up with some solutions.
Okay, inside of the Cynefin framework, which is a cognitive framework, it's not a decision-making model, but it's just one of those windows you can draw out, and it has four subsets. And then one of them is called chaos, one window. And what's said about chaos in the Cynefin model of cognitive framework is that tyrants love chaos. Because there's no predictive pattern to solution sets, and every solution is novel, and you have to circle around people whose word becomes God. And so I think what we're seeing here is someone saying, well, I'm not getting my way. And it doesn't matter which side's saying it. One side or the other is saying, yeah, I'm not getting my way. So now I want to throw us into chaos because then I become a demigod. And my way becomes the word of God. So that's a very, very self-serving, egotistical, maniacal opinion, if you ask me. It is remarkably self-serving. So buyer beware. Then the other thing I'm going to say is to reiterate what Chad pointed out was we don't have a balkanization, and that went very badly, by the way, in case anybody needs that bit of history. The breakup of the Soviet Union into the Russian Federation led in one war after another, Georgia, a couple in Chechnya, an ongoing war in Ukraine, and God knows what's next. So, and it's destabilized Europe. So I'm not sure, this whole divorce thing works anyway for the geopolitical, regions. It sure as heck didn't work well for the Balkans, who went into, a 4-year genocide. So you have every reason to enter this with some apprehension. But moreover, it's what Chad said. This is not an 11-way, a 28-way, a 50-way split. This is, I want to be demagogue for this group, and they want to be demagogue for that group. So all of you don't get what you want. You get what I want and what I force upon you. And I'm like, oh, all right. So it's a Republican-Democrat split, is it? Because I've never been either. And so libertarian does take a whole nother look at it. Libertarian's mantra could be summed up by, we're going to take over. We're going to take over the entire United States and then leave you alone. Leave you to your own devices. And I think at that point, you'll see just how many colors there are. Because I would venture to guess that for every state, there are probably 4 to 6 different social, economic, political solutions for every single state. Multiply that times 50 states, you come out with 300 different solutions. Is that what you're talking about when you're talking about a divorce? Because this red-blue crap, I don't want any part of that divorce.
All right, I think this is an interesting topic. That's why I went with it tonight. And thanks for Les for bringing this to the forefront. So I'm gonna piggyback on what Chad said. There's just not fine, lines that separate everybody. And I pulled this from the 2020 election. It's obviously by county and whatnot, but you can just see that there's just blue and red everywhere. And the blue, although it appears smaller, those are your major metropolitan areas. Those are very high density areas of populations. It's just not clear cut. And I just don't see how it would be possible for, just an ominous freaking divorce by states. I'm like, how do you decide that? What about the purple states? How do they go? Those are populations that are almost half and half. How do they, which side of the pendulum do they fall on? So I don't see how a divorce, something that's not going to be end up in an armed confrontation could physically happen. Eventually rounds are going to fly. And then my ultimate opinion of this is who wins by this? And that's without a doubt America's enemies. Fucking communist China is who wins from us falling apart and dividing up into smaller nations. Because guess what? Then China becomes the sole freaking superpower in the world. And what are we? We're just a bunch of broken freaking states at that point. So at this particular time, I would not be in favor of any type of divorce or civil war or however the hell you want to look at it. Now, with that said, I absolutely am appalled on particularly the left in this country and a lot of the stuff that they're pushing. I mean, it's almost like freaking opposite day every single time I see their mouth opens up. So let's open up the floor, guys, and see what you guys have to say about this.
Yeah, well, I'll take that mantle since I brought the topic up. Yeah, I agree with everybody here. It's like I don't see it working out. I see it being a nasty, messy thing. And let me give you 3 topics. This is all just scratching the surface because I think any of the topics could make a live stream in and of themselves. Topic number 1, let's take the state of Missouri. And for argument's sake, let's blue is want to stay, red is want to go. I think you could safely say that Missouri would be a red state. Well, in Missouri, there's these holes in the grounds that have missiles armed with nuclear weapons on them. Does anybody think for a second blue's going to let us keep them or let red keep them? No. And even if you can't move the missiles easy, they're not going to let you have the nukes. They're definitely not going to give you the launch codes. And other parts of the armed forces that are in Missouri, well, there's stealth bombers there. Now you can easily fly that bomber away, but the factory that supports it's in St. Louis. Do you think red is going to give blue all the parts for the planes that they won't let them keep? And do you think blue is going to go, oh, yeah, that's super military weapon. Yeah, we'll let you keep it. Yeah. That's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. Problem number 2, down there in Texas and Louisiana, other states that could possibly go to the red team, there's this thing called the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Blue's not going to let you keep that. And third, now this is really just scratching the surface of a problem, the fleet. Who gets it? And what is its responsibilities if this happens? And talk about a wormhole to go down. That's the easiest one to address. What do you do with the Army and the Air Force, and who gets what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the problems are insurmountable.
To go back to your point number 1 about the nuclear weapons, if you listen to rhetoric from the far left, what do they say? Well, the right's a bunch of Nazis. The red's a bunch of Nazis. How could we possibly allow a bunch of Nazis to have nuclear weapons? That's preposterous. So I don't see how this could devolve in anything but an armed conflict.
Absolutely. And if you're red and if you're in a state, because Missouri is not the only state with holes in the grounds with missiles in them, we've watched Ukraine. Giving up your nukes is a really dumb idea. They're not going to do it.
Well, it's interesting that we throw around words like Nazis and fascists and communists. I'm not saying there aren't Nazis and fascists and communists and bigots and racists and this anti-Zionist and Zionist and any other ist you want to throw out here. America is made up of many, many different things. And they're not all pleasant, okay? I mean, there's some of them that are downright objectionable. But guess what? We said, come one, come all. And when I hear someone saying, now, I don't mean off the cuff. I've said off the cuff, time for a divorce or something to this effect, right? But when you hear like elected political leaders saying, yep, time to break apart, what I hear them saying is twofold. As I've already alluded to, yeah, time to break apart because I'm far more powerful in my fascist, communist, whatever, KKK camp. That makes me a demigod. So it's definitely a bold-faced, overt, act of seizing power is what they want. That's one thing. But the other thing is what's very clearly in their intent is I never liked this America idea. I never liked plurality. I never voted for freedom and individualism. No. Might makes right. I want the rule. I want to rule with an iron fist. And I don't care which ism you choose to adhere to. Some of them are very near and dear to my heart. And I'm going, yeah, I'm not going with you guys. If there's this balkanization and, I've got my fellow Roman Catholics going, the new Holy Roman Empire, I'm like, and we're not going over there. Nope, don't want any part of that. Robert Nozick is the founder of American libertarianism, and he is on the record saying, I would never want to live in a libertarian utopia. And I'm with him on that. I like this whole idea of individualism. You want to talk about identity politics? The smallest minority is the individual. And how about we do this? I know it's radical, and it was radical when it was proposed way back in 1775. But how about we try liberty? Individual liberty.
Where you at, Bruce? I know you're on board with this.
Yeah, so the problem with individual liberty is that takes power away from somebody. I think Chad, I think there's a big picture here, right? And Chad kind of hit on it. And listen, we're experimenting with this already in terms of a divorce. It's called states' rights. So after the Civil War, states' rights were, I think it was Alito that said this, but were for the most part kind of dampened and washed away, because states' rights eventually led to a civil war. The two factions fighting one another. This is really what we're talking about, over representation that couldn't be agreed upon and guarantees that had been broken by the federal government. So essentially, without getting into too much detail, one side said, okay, we're out. We can't trust you. We're out. And the other side said, no, you're not. We need you too much to let you go out. So let's both go at one another and kill one another until someone capitulates. And that's exactly what happened. So after the Civil War, we talked about this in the last live stream, to the victors go the spoils of war and go the way that history is told. Those states' rights were greatly removed and diminished so that it couldn't happen again. That wasn't written anywhere, but that was obviously the effect. So here we are. But the good news is, over the last few years, and really the last maybe even few decades, we've seen a little chipping away at this federalist idea, and more rights have been given to the states. The latest one that everybody is up in arms about is abortion. And I know Brent hates talking about abortion on his manly pro-gun channel, American flag waving that we've got. But it's an important topic because it impacts roughly half of the country. So that's a pretty big topic. All the females that are out there, they've got a stake in it one way or the other. And it's a states' rights issue. What happened in that decision? Abortion wasn't banned at all. The decision simply said, let the states decide what works for the state. Now, this doesn't have to be about abortion. This could be about anything. It's about gun rights too. We both know that there's a Second Amendment, yet what you can do gun related in California is very different than what you can do gun related in New Hampshire or Texas. How is that even possible? Well, it's a clear indicator that those two different areas have very different views of what that right should look like. And because of states' rights, they do look differently, even as to what the individual can do. So much so that if I go to fly to California, I have to read up on the newest gun laws and find out, can I even take a gun there? And what loopholes do I have to go through to do it? And coming to Texas, it's like, hey, what's the new thing I can walk around with today, strapped to my chest? Because they've went two completely different directions on this thing. So I think that states' rights is the solution that some of you are talking about, which is let the people in their area decide what they want to do and leave them the hell alone. But look at the resistance that we get to it. Something just as simple as the Second Amendment, or just as simple as abortion. Look at the resistance that it stirs when you take the power away from the federal government and you hand it to the individual state.
Spot
well
on.
said, Bruce.
That's pretty much my entire argument, is keep the union together and let's try this thing called individual freedom. And let's let our elected representatives at state, which is state, by the way, means country, nation, right? Nation, state, country. These are all synonyms. So we call ours, we don't say provinces. Most people call theirs the province of X, the territory of X. Those are subsets of one nation. We don't say that. We say, well, we've got the nation, United States, United States of America, another word is United Nations of America, and each one of this, Ohio is a nation, California is a nation, Alaska is a nation. So how about we let nations be nations? And then, there is the minimal guidance set forth in our Constitution, but the nations have to actually articulate what that is. Where we get lost on this is we want to win at the federal level, which should be pretty much anemic. I mean, it should just be like this governing anemic thing. But we want to win elections at that, so we're going to have this two-party Democrat Republican. No one even knows what it means. I sure as hell don't, and I don't want to be part of it. How about we outlaw? How about this? How about we outlaw political parties?
Well, there's a
Yes,
concept.
yes. The two-party system is really to blame here. Absolutely. I think you're spot on. But going back to my original comments, I think we probably need to give maybe some third parties a chance. And I think the Libertarian Party of live and let live is might be the way to go. Let's give them the federal government for 16 years, let them tear it down. And because right now the federal government's just too big. It's not concerned with the people it's supposed to serve. It's concerned with keeping its status and supporting itself. Yeah. That's what our federal government is all about right now. But I think we're kind of failing to address kind of a problem here. And this goes with the national divorce argument as well as the states' rights argument. And look, I know we're sick and tired of the dumb, emotionally based Marxist policies put forth by the Democrats. But a national divorce doesn't solve the underlying problem. Wokeism is still a virus in need of a cure, and it spreads like a goddamn virus. I think that it's obvious that red Americans don't want to oppose its will on blue Americans. Of course, somebody on the other side may argue to the contrary, but the reverse doesn't seem to be true. Who's to say wokeism won't affect a young generation in red territory? You got the great city of Austin in your home state of Texas. It's a liberal cesspool. We got Memphis and Nashville and Tennessee in my home state, and it is a liberal cesspool. So I think we're failing to address the underlying problem here, and that being wokeism, Marxism, and we have to defeat it. And just trying to draw a boundary and hope it doesn't make its way in is not going to be an effective way to fight it. We have to fight it on other terms, the terms of ideas, battling it with ideas. Hope is never a course of action. So just hoping that it won't infect red territory is not, that's not going to work. Putting a fence up and signs that say do not enter isn't going to stop it.
No, I wholly agree with you. And being a logistician, I tend to look at problems from a logistical point of view. One of the problems with national divorce is you're saying you can't get along. And then the problem arises, how do you divide up the property? If you can't agree on the color of an orange, how do you decide who gets the nuke and the aircraft carrier and the natural resource? So the allure of it's there. It's kind of in a way like socialism. You look at the promise of socialism, and as Bismarck said, any man who's not a socialist at 20 has no heart. Any man who's still a socialist at 30 has no brain. It's kind of the same thing with the national divorce, because you see it solving a lot of problems. And when you get down into the weeds of making it happen, all you're seeing is you're creating problems way worse than the original one that you had. The problem also that you have in national divorce is it's going to become more appealing the more unresponsive the federal government becomes. And a great example right now is Texas with dealing with the illegal immigration problem. The federal government is doing everything it possibly can to not deal with the problem. Texas is getting raked over the coals by the cities that it's depositing the illegals in New York and Washington, D.C. And I love the governor's comment you got down there when New York was complaining about 4,000 people. And he goes, that was yesterday. You're complaining about 4,000 in a month. I can see for Texas, the idea would be really appealing because the economics of the situation would make breaking away certainly appealing. That one state's doing the job of 50 and not getting reimbursed for it. At that point, you might as well say, screw it. If I got to do it anyways, I'll be on my own. And the allure of it's going to capture a lot of people's imagination the more it gets talked about, because like all political ideas, people look at the outcome and never look at the consequences.
Well, yeah, you're just talking about military assets, but there's so much more the federal government has control of. We talked about nukes, we talked about the military. What about all the money the government's got? Well, who gets the CIA? Who gets the intelligence? Who gets National Archives? Who gets NASA? This is stuff that we would have to figure out in a national divorce.
Oh, yeah. NASA's a great point. NASA's controlled from Houston and launched from Florida. Right now, they're looking like they're on red team.
Well, nobody's going to have jack shit when communist China takes over, because that's exactly what's going to happen if we split. So,
well, let's play this game out. If we split on the red blue, let's just ignore everyone else. We split on red, blue. Let's say we find solutions for this, whatever it is. I don't care if we split the country right in half, said, red takes the East Coast, blue takes the West Coast. It doesn't matter what the answer is. You've split once on a fictional fault line and a variable fault line, meaning it goes back and forth. So then you need to throw in a green. Well, hey, the next generation is going to divorce again a red, blue, green. Then we're going to throw in a white, red, blue, white. Then we're going to throw in a yellow, red, blue, white, yellow. You see what I'm saying? You're subdividing and subdividing and subdividing until conflict is inevitable. And not the least of which is the one that Brent keeps bringing up. And yeah, if I were Mexico, I'd be standing there going, keep dividing, because eventually I'll kick all your asses. It won't take China.
Yeah,
No,
this dividing, this kind of like you said, this divorce of breaking up things. And Americans are so unfocused. That's sort of what keeps this big federal government going. Not necessarily those of us that are here, but I have people at work that come and talk to me about, different political topics that are going on and what's in the news today. But what is in the news today, right? Like, what are we talking about? We're talking about, the news is Trump's got some documents in his Mar-a-Lago home. This is what people are talking about. Is this a real issue for anybody? Does this impact any one of us watching at all whatsoever? But what happens with the federal government is, and what happens with the news media is, they get us to think that this is a big deal while real problems are happening in the background, while real rights are being taken away or limited. And we forget about what's going on here because of the shiny thing that's over here, the shiny thing being something that's really not important to anyone. I tell everyone when they come to me and they talk about voting or thinking about voting or they're frustrated with voting or whatever, as I say this, and I've said this before, I'll say it again real quick. Think about the top 3 things that impact you. The top 3 issues that really impact you and your family, your kids, a future generation. And figure out which one of those 3 is most important to you. Then figure out which party aligns itself with that one thing. And that's the way you should vote. Don't take your eye off the ball. The most important thing to you is what you should be focused on, because it seems like that everyone, the whole country, is trying to get you to focus on something that's relatively insignificant, that will never impact you or your kids whatsoever anyway. And if you go and vote based on that, well, you're wasting your vote. You're not really serving yourself with that vote. But not enough people do. It's like I'm the only one that seems to be really saying that, because if you listen to the news media, if you read, whatever news blogs that are out there, or even listen to people that do a lot of live streams, they make the mistake of falling into that same trap of focusing on the small little things that are going on day to day rather than the really big picture. And the truth is, if you focus on the really big picture, most of us are actually in agreement on it. And we would absolutely dominate the country. You go around, just go to a college campus, go to a Walmart, go wherever it is that you want to go, and start interviewing people and say, hey, what do you think about the government? They're going to be talking about little silly things that don't even impact them right now, because their eye has been taken off of their ball and they're looking at that shiny little feature that's out there. So let's see. So Flightosaurus, I like that. I'm a Tiberosaurus Rex fan, so I'm a big fan of all you internet personalities that have a dinosaur theme to you. I don't know. I have to disagree with Bruce. I take this whole Trump thing as a serious risk to my right to vote. They're trying to take Trump off the ballot like Iran or Nicaragua does. I don't disagree with you, Flightosaurus, at all. You're absolutely right. This is not something we're disagreeing on. What I'm saying is that they are using an insignificant topic that doesn't impact anyone to then take your eye off the vote. This is exactly what I'm saying. They're getting people to focus on something that's not important, and they're trying to get them to vote against Trump because of it. And it's probably been, I don't know how successful it is. I've got a Hispanic, Mexican-American guy that I work with that's a forklift driver. And he's like, Bruce, what do you think about this whole thing? And here was his angle. His angle was Trump's going to win. People have been picking on Trump for years. They're grasping at straws, and we're just tired of it. And I'm at the point of just voting for Trump because I think that they're now just picking on him. So I'm not sure if it's going to play out the way that they want it to play out. But you're right. Their attempt is to find a way to keep Trump from running for president or to keep Trump from winning the president. And it looks petty to us, those of us that follow it. It looks petty and it looks silly. But to that soccer mom that's worried about what the Kardashians are wearing today, maybe it's effective. Maybe it's impactful. To those voters that aren't really focused on the important things that are out there to them, but get distracted by the shiny little object in the corner. Yeah, that they actually may pull some of those votes. But I'll say this, it's the job of us, all of those of us that are in the know, to make sure that when we run into somebody like that, we help get them focused if we can.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing to that. I would say conservatism isn't dead. Trump is not the end-all, be-all of conservatism. Somebody else will step up.
Yeah,
Oh,
Chad,
yeah.
real quick, let me just say this real quick. I agree. It's not about Trump the man. It's almost about he is just a symbol, right, of a feeling that the country had before Trump. It was the Tea Party, wasn't it? Same kind of thing. So you can take Trump. Trump can say tomorrow he's out of politics and he's got a new reality show he's going to promote. And we've already got a guy prepped to step right into his shoes, don't we? John at UW Gear will tell you his man in Florida is riled up and ready to go. That's right. There it is, DeSantis. So hey, it's not about the face on the platform. It's about the platform. I'm sorry, Les. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, nature abhors a vacuum. One guy steps out, somebody else will race to fill it. They'll want to fill Trump's shoes. They'll say they're the next Trump. They're more Trump than Trump. Primary example, it didn't work out that way when Reagan gone. HW there said, "Oh, I'm just like Reagan. I'm the next Reagan." He wasn't, but yeah, he that's what he said he was. And it'll be that way. Somebody will want to fill those shoes because they want political power.
Yeah, I want to go back to some. I can't remember if it was Bruce or Chad was talking about, but it was straight state right issue, and obviously I'm all about states' rights. However, I think it's worth talking about because let's look at this for a second. California, right? They just came. Doc, I think you're picking up ammo. No. All right. So if you guys don't have your mics muted, please mute them. They're looking to outlaw freaking gasoline powered vehicles by 2030 something, right? Come on, that's not even a real expectation, okay? And again, it's on California because they just keep revoting these assholes back into power, right? They had a recall election not too long ago, and they still kept their same governor after all that crap that he imposed on them during the COVID shit. Right? It's just this mass exodus out of that state, but yet, they just keep going down that rabbit hole. And it's almost like, poor Texas here, we're sitting here and we're getting invaded from the South. And then we're also getting invaded from the West. There are so many freaking people from California moving to Texas. It's ridiculous. And I can't help but wonder that if, let's say there was some national divorce, okay, I can just see California just continuing to devolve into this just communist bastion, right? You literally have homeless everywhere on the streets there that eventually even the farthest left of the left are going to say, okay, this is unlivable. And then they're going to move. And where are they going to go? They're going to go to freaking Texas, like they have been doing already. And so I don't think, going back to the original topic of this national divorce, I don't think it's the answer, because unless you literally put up walls and regulate these people coming in from blue America into the country of Texas, or however this is going to, be put together, it's still going to have the same problems. I can't drive around here in Texas where I live without seeing these stupid Beto stickers. This guy is the biggest piece of shit known on the face of the freaking country. And I can't damn fucking Beto stickers on fucking windshields. The same guy that days after the Uvalde shooting, he's up there, bodies haven't even been put in the ground yet, and he's talking about freaking AR-15 confiscation.
Yeah, I never thought I'd find myself in agreement or support of bacterial infections, but I find that we seem to have a common goal today.
Yeah. Hey, Brent, could you clarify your point? I wasn't quite sure where you stood on Beto there.
Oh, sorry. Let me clarify. Robert Francis O'Rourke. That's his real name. Beto was just something he put together to appeal to Hispanics. It has nothing to do with his real name.
Well, Robert Francis O'Rourke has a quote-unquote bacterial infection that may or may not have to do with primates, and it may or may not be spread through anal sex.
We'll see if he had a sex robot, he would not have these problems.
Hold on. This is news to me. Did he get monkeypox? You're kidding me. Oh my goodness. All right. I'm going muted.
Got to wrap it up. You got to wrap it up.
Swinging it back around to the original topic, though, I got a feeling this issue, we're going to hear about this for a while. People are going to be talking about us. Look, we're talking about it. And I think people will get caught. I mean, it caught my imagination for a while, but the moment you really sit and think about it, Brent's right. It ends in violence. You know, using my example of Missouri as one state, you know, blue flies away the bombers. They're going to tank St. Louis for what's in it. You know, they're not going to let Texas and Louisiana keep all the oil. They're just not going to do that. You know, believe it or not, the Russians proved NASA's not a big deal. They just recreated it. You know, they left what was in Kazakhstan, rented it for a while, and then made their own thing in Russia. So that's not an insurmountable obstacle. But, you know, the armed forces, you know, you're not going to get a Velvet Revolution thing like Czechoslovakia had, becoming Czech Republic and Slovakia, where they very peacefully split and divided everything up. It's not going to happen here because there's too much at stake for each side.
Okay, then let's go we can't. So what we're all agreeing is there's not really an easy solution here. And I think it was Bruce who was saying, okay, then let's do the difficult thing, the really, really tough thing. Let's win. I'm sorry, maybe that was you, Chad. Point is, let's put on our gloves, let's suit up for a battle, and let's win. And sure, it took us 60 years, 3 generations to get here. It will take us 60 years to win it back. But here's some battlegrounds to start with, or here are our champions anyway. Right now, our early champions on. It's Reason, it's Reason TV, it's PragerU, it's Hillsdale College. Can we go there? And let's start winning back. You know, the discussion, the political discussion. Let's point out the problems with identity politics. Let's point out the ethics, you know, the ethical violations and the fallacies of Marxist arguments. Let's take back the stage, and let's do it ethically, morally.
I want to answer this one comment over there. Alaskan Ballistic says that we're really stupid enough to not work out these issues. Yes, we're that stupid. Look at all the issues we can't work out right now that are way simpler. You know, so yeah, that's the whole reason for the divorce, because we can't work out the issues.
And I agree, by the way, Jude, that we cannot win a discussion with fanatics. No, we cannot, and I am not going to try. I do want to talk to those fanatics' children. That's who I want to talk to, because I want to talk to their kids. I want to win them over to morality, to ethics, to civics, to duty and patriotism, to bettering humanity. Let's do that. Let's talk about that instead of what you're owed, right? I mean, ask not what your country can do for you, right? Well, that's not what wokeism says. It says, hey, what can this country do for me?
Isn't it amazing in the modern day, the Democrats would consider John F. Kennedy a hard right guy, probably farther to the right than Trump or even Alex Jones.
Yeah, and pull down Martin Luther King Jr. statues because he believed in marriage between a man and a woman. Right? That's pretty extreme. That's pretty crazy. I got two quick comments here because I'm following the chat, guys. I'm trying to sort of police the chat, and I want you guys to know that if you type a comment, one of us reads it, and it syncs. At least one of us reads it. I try to follow it, but one of the issues that we're having is that if you use a word like, if you so much as say shit, if you so much as say kill, YouTube is trying to censor that comment. It's not us. Okay. It's not us. So just be aware, if you clean up any of the cussing, it'll ensure your comment gets through. I'm going through trying to approve them. But YouTube is, man, you want to talk about Nazis and fascists, man. They've got the tall polished boots on, and man, they sound professional when they march down the street. Secondly, I forget about my second thought. I'll come back to it, guys. You know how I am. I got a one-track mind, but we love and appreciate those of you that are commenting. We're trying to read all of them. We're not censoring any of those. It's very rarely that any of us will censor any of that, as long as it's not ridiculously racist or something, talking about messing with young kids. You guys know the deal. You police yourselves, but just know that we've noticed over the last few weeks that YouTube has really stepped in a big way. So just be aware of that.
Yeah, I'll confirm that if you use profanity or anything in the comments, it automatically like hides your comment, and I have to physically go in there, minute by minute and scroll through and verify and approve those comments after the fact, like after the video is already published. So yeah, if your shit's getting muted or whatever, it's because you're using profanity or something that's inflammatory, at least according to YouTube. So FYI.
And one more note for all you guys in the comments. You guys are commenting so fast, it is hard to read them all as they go by.
Yeah, but I'll jump in there and say one that I saw just a momentary explosion of, put God back in the public school. And I'm not fundamentally opposed to this, but what I did was I put my kids back in, back into the school of God. So I went and found a religious school and stuck my kids in that. And I also see people saying homeschooled. Well, yeah, frankly, that's what we did next, because frankly, the private schools, as good as they were, and I mean, they're really quite good Catholic schools there. When they got past elementary, the Catholic school admitted, we can't keep up with homeschoolers. Homeschoolers are exponentially outperform us. And so that just, my wife turned and went, oh my God. So then we homeschooled. So, so both of those are viable options that you don't have to fight this fight, guys. You don't have to say, oh, how do I get God back into school? You don't. You go into the Church of God and you have your kids schooled there. Or you stay in your house and you school them there. Now, I know that's a lift. That is a lift. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's easier than changing the school, is to remove your kids and put them where they get the best education and a God-fearing one. So this is what I'm saying. Let's take it back. Let's go back into the street and take it. You don't need public school. That's just one more government, babysitting, brainwashing program that you don't need it. You know what's a funny thing about all this? I will sit there and sing that till the cows come home. And the funny thing is, I'm not even anti-public school. I'm for public school revision. And oh, by the way, if we want to revise it to put God back in there, hallelujah. But there's a fix right here, right now.
I'm going to back you up on that, Doc, because my kids did half their time in the public schools and half in private schools. And a teacher's comment that said it so perfectly. My daughter was never good at math. All of a sudden, in her junior year in private school, she comes home with an A-. Whereas parents were like, yay! Go in, meet the teacher, like, how'd you do this? His answer? Figured out what the public school didn't do in the 5th grade. and then he fixed
All right,
the problem.
I'm gonna jump in. So I'm not. Let me preface this by saying I'm not against homeschooling by all means. If you want to but come on, you guys have to admit though, there is kind of a social thing.
Yep.
In terms of going to a public school, right, and the interaction with people versus being at home and kind of living in a bubble. Doc, you can say this, but I've known some people that were homeschooled, and there was something different about them. Like you pick it up right off the bat.
Okay, so homeschool, let's call it homeschool up to about 1990 was for religious fanatics and kids with severe disabilities. All right, and from the 1990s on, do you know the state of North Carolina has more homeschoolers than private schoolers? And I don't think they're the only state that claims that anymore. It is just growing to monumental levels, so much that here in the state of Virginia, they don't want us homeschooling anymore. And they actively seek to punish homeschoolers. But when you say something's weird about them, you are right. Our kids were socialized. And when I say socialized, I don't mean that they were socialized merely on this continent. They actually went to schools and did like collaborative work with schools in South Korea. All right. So, and they started college full time at the age of 16 and 14 because they were done. They were done. And when they tested, they had to do standardized testing. They were testing in the top 2 and 3% of, at the age of 14 and 16, going to college. They were testing in the top 2 and 3% of high school seniors. Now, when they were in Catholic school, they also did above the par. They were testing it anywhere from 55 percentile all the way up to 70 percentile of kids of their age in the country. So the Catholic school did quite well. But when they started homeschooling 4 years later, they were testing the top 2 and 3% across the board, across every subject. When we went and took that and we said, hey, someone suggested, go talk to the university, see if they can get any scholarships. You know what the university told us? They said, no, your daughters were homeschooled. Homeschoolers always test super high, just off the charts high. There's no scholarships for you.
Well, they play these games in the school here. My daughter graduated valedictorian in her class at a school literally called School for the Gifted and stuff, and was told by William and Mary that she could not go there. Their reasoning, you're from Northern Virginia. If you were from Tazewell or Charlottesville, there's a space for you. So being academically good doesn't even guarantee your entry into college. And for my little rant about schooling, to all your parents out there that are worried about paying for college, screw college. Spend your money now. Spend it now. Because the first rule of college is if you can't get somebody else to pay for it, you don't need to go. So don't save for college. Spend your money now on the schools, and your kids will be better off for it.
Or go to a trade school or technical school.
Excellent point, Chad. Excellent point. Because you know what? When in this country did we get so freaking far off course that fireman, plumber, and stonemason are unhonorable professions? You know, a guy with a college degree who can write me one fancy ass report doesn't do me any good in life. The guy who can unclog my plumbing because there's poo coming up in my bathtub every time I flush on a Saturday, that guy's valuable to me. You know, and I'm happy to pay him $300 an hour to solve that problem.
You know,
Brent,
or there's another school you can go to. There's another school you can go to instead of college, and that is your sons can start a lawn mowing or paint company. Your daughters can start a data entry company or become the barista at their own coffee shop. My point is that starting a business is a school.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And not to sound like the world's most horrible boss, but a few of my employees have been reminded, wow, that's a very impressive degree you got. You realize you're working for a grunt.
All right, so I got two quick things. First of all, I do have a lot of feedback, don't I? I don't know why, guys. I don't have anything on, so I'm not sure why I'm getting any kind of feedback there. Hope you guys can hear me. But first of all, don't make the mistake of thinking that because we are sort of anti-progressive that we are all in support of all like Republican ideas or the Republican Party. Don't make that mistake. I consider myself an independent, although I've never voted Democrat, and I think I voted like independent once for like Perot, but that's not my allegiance. I'm independent and I'm an open thinker. But again, like I told you before, I look at those things that are very most important to me, and that determines how I vote and who I support. And I also only support a candidate that can win. And unfortunately, the reality is that means almost exclusively I'm voting Republican. It's not that I consider myself a Republican. It's just the way that things are. So I'm not sure if that clears things up or not. And in terms of homeschooling, don't think that I'm opposed to homeschooling. I'm not. But let me give you my personal scenario. I have one child, a single child, a daughter. And one of the things I realized when she was really young was that she had zero social skills. Can you imagine being a little kid and getting your social skills from this guy? All right. I'm about as abrasive and ugly and mean and hateful and as much of an asshole as they come. So we realized really quick when she was around other kids, her whole thing was to ask nicely once and then just beat the hell out of them. We're like, look, this isn't going to get you through life. All right. This isn't going to work. You got to play well with others. You got to stay out of jail before you're 14. So we put her into a young daycare program to simply help build the social skills she needed to work with others. And it's important that you get those at a very young age. If those of you that listen to Jordan Peterson, this is something he studied and talked about. But when you're a really young child, that's when you're building those social skills. Now, what is a good middle ground solution to that? And Doc hit on it. Is something like a private school, whether it's Catholic or not. But I've got family members that go to a Catholic private school. It's not that they're any type of super Catholics or religious fanatics or anything like that. It's just a very doctrinated school. And you know what? They're doing really, really well. So they've got both the social skills that they need. Their level of intelligence is extremely high. And a lot of that is due to the school and education that they're getting. I won't deny them that. They're getting top rate education school. And when you look at these now, since COVID has happened, you look at Catholic schools, most of these Catholic schools have a huge waiting line. They're not just waving people in trying to get support like they did 10 years ago. No. You want to get in there? You better have your shit together or you're not going to get in, because they're picking the best of the best to come into that school. And the side effect is some of them do cost a lot of money. That's just the reality of being one of the best of the best. So anyway, I wanted to say that because for those, to Brent's point, that young kids need social skills, and if you stay at home, that you're not necessarily going to get the social skills. I think that he's got a good point there.
Okay,
hey, I have to jump in because I feel like people are hearing me incorrectly, right? Because I was watching the comment section. Like, I am not against homeschooling at all. I was just saying that there is something to say for going to a public school and having that social interaction, right? Listen, I mean, think outside the box here. All right, we're done with our previous conversation, so maybe we'll take this on as our new topic. When you go to freaking school's brutal. The playground is brutal. If you're fat, you're gonna get made fun of. All right, it's fat shaming. And that's gonna make you want to lose weight. Okay, you get tough. You get in fights. You fight kids growing up in life. You learn this shit. If you're homeschooled your whole life and you're not participating in those outside events, when are you going to get those interactions as a young man or woman, all right, where you learn that brutalness? Okay, when I went to recruit training in the United States Marine Corps, I had my whole being on the playground and interacting with bullies and having and all that other stuff, being fat shamed. Not that I was fat. I'm just saying all that stuff. You get made fun of when you do stupid shit. If you live in a bubble your whole life and you don't do any outside social stuff, you may be academically badass, right? But there's other aspects of life. Really smart people, common sense kind of stuff, right? So I'm not against homeschooling. I'm just saying there's something to be said for actually going to a physical environment where there's other children and growing up and you learn those social interacting skills.
No, I think you're right. What I was trying to say, Brent, was simply this. Well, a couple of things, but the big thing was that it's not necessarily a fair sampling. You have a sampling error when you say, hey, I've noticed there's more autistic kids. Let's just grab that. I noticed there's more autistic kids coming from homeschooling, therefore homeschooling must somehow create this. No, that's because they know their kids are on the spectrum and they take them and then they homeschool them, right? So it's a sampling error. But I do recognize that there's certainly, if you go back before 1990, that's really everybody that was homeschooled was either some kind of disability or they were in a really strictly fundamentalist religion. Okay, that is really the demographic of who is homeschooled. There are a few exceptions, like millionaires, movie stars whose kids were homeschooled. There's a few exceptions, but they're very darn few. What's happened now is that this has become mainstream. And what I'm saying is, to go back to Bruce's point, when you walk onto campus at a Lutheran or a Christian or a Catholic or a Jewish school, right? A private school. You pull up, and fifth graders, you pull up to drop your kids off, and fifth graders open the back door, pull your kids out, and greet you with, "Good morning, ma'am." When you walk across campus, kids see an adult coming, they stand back against the wall, and one kid opens the door for you and says, "Let me get that for you, sir." And it's more than just these politeness. I mean, they're raised with, yes, they're still kids. Yes, they're still naughty. Yes, they still get in fights and all this other stuff. But they learn the evilness of communism in those in those schools. Now, I'm just saying that there's wonderful things there. Now, when you homeschool them at an older age, pretty much your middle school, don't do middle school, just jump like we did, just jump right into high school, skip middle school. Now everything they're learning is with adults. Like they're doing internships with adults. And so a lot of people get very confused when they meet my daughters. You guys have met my daughters, and they're like, whoa, these kids are like creepily like well adjusted. Like they'll hold their own, they look me in the eye, they shake my hand. If I tell them a lie or something like that, they laugh with me and go, "I'm sorry, I'm afraid you're lying to me, sir." And I'm like, well, that's because their dad is a big fat liar, pants on fire. And they've learned that, darn it. I lied to them for years. But that was my way of beating them up and being a bully. And now they've learned to fend for themselves. I'm just saying it's kind of a different, it's a different dynamic now, Brent. But I do admit that I am very, very glad we decided not to homeschool for elementary. We did not homeschool them. We stuck them in a private school, which is religious. And oh, by the way, I saw several people say here, this is generally true. If you are a member of that church, doesn't matter what the demographic is. If you're a member of that church and you tithe to that church, there are significant discounts, particularly when you have kids by the dozen. No, I'm not kidding. Even just having two daughters in at the same time, like the second one was half price. It really was, or less. Right. So there's some really, really good affordable ways of doing it.
You're talking about homeschool has come a long way, but Brent, brother, you're right. But as one commenter pointed out, man, high school isn't what it used to be 20 years ago. Schools have changed. Schools have changed massively today. Things like bullying are taken seriously. You got all this liberal woke crap. You got teachers using classrooms to, as therapy and stuff like that. So public schools have come a long way. But on that, my kids were in homeschool, and they actually have group study sessions amongst local homeschoolers. So you can actually get all the homeschoolers together, and they'll do a class together, or they'll do some activity together. But there's another solution to that, and that's team sports. Team sports teaches that socialization as well as that competition and things like that you're talking about. So
my poor daughter is
on the sports.
What's that?
I said I half agree with Chad on the sports. I do agree that sports has a good thing. It teaches teamwork, which is one of the most important skills a person can have. Where I disagree with it is in the public schools. Sports should be completely independent. Matter of fact, I think one of the things you give as a benefit to the professional sports leagues for their monopoly is, oh, you support this kids program. It's not negotiable. You support it. And oh, by the way, your players are required to be good examples. Digressing there for a moment. But in school, there's so many schools that I see that they go out of the way to cater to the kids on the sports team that it's actually detrimental to the greater student body. So while I think sports are very important, I am very against them being linked to the school. And one of the reasons why is, what if your kid plays, what problem with my daughter, she played field hockey. There was no organized team for it in school. There was nothing made in school to make allowances for her games. Oh, but if you were on the cheer squad, every allowance in the world was made, So no, sports should not be linked to the school. I think it's important, but it's not a school thing.
It's an interesting idea, Les. Let me point out one more thing that we haven't brushed on that I think is important for the kids. And this coming from a father of an individual child. When the coronavirus first broke out, there was this meme or little video going around, whatever you call it. But there was this little Hispanic girl at a ball game. She was probably about 6, and she literally was taking her tongue and was dragging it down the handrail at the baseball game. And in Spanish, the writing was like, this girl's not going to get the Rona. And there's something to that, right? And if you keep your kids at home, especially if it's a single kid, they're not going to be exposed to all of these nasty, filthy viruses and ailments that kids bring that you'll get in public school. We can't see it, Brent. Brent, that looks like Barry. Is that Barry? But these, so the point being is that part of it's health. If you keep your kids in a bubble, and we're not saying that you do, but if they're not out there interacting with other kids, and it can be through other sports, it can be through church events, it can be through whatever. But one good way certainly is public school. Everybody knows when their kid first goes to school, that kid's kind of sickly for a little while, right? Because they're getting exposed to all this stuff going around from other kids. It's important that they do it at a young age, because you don't want to have, say having chicken pox at like 6 is not nearly as bad as having chicken pox at 15. And that's just that's just one example. But if you're an adult and you start getting hit with these things for the first time, it's much more impactful than it is when you're a little kid and maybe you just get a runny nose or a cough from it. So I think there's some health issues there too. And I guess all I'm saying is that that's one of the factors that I had to think about also when I had a young child that was an only child, about getting her out there. It wasn't just social impact, but you want to get them exposed to all these things that nasty kids are spreading around, and so that they can go ahead and get used to it, build up an immunity to it, and get it out of their system.
Okay. One anecdote isn't much of a counter argument to that, but I'm just going to say, while pandemic went on, my daughters went to Florida. They went to North Carolina for weeks at a time. We went up to New England. We went to China. We went to South Korea. We're headed now very soon to Europe. I'm just saying, like, they went to Missouri. They went out into wilderness camps with a bunch of men in one shepherd for multiple semesters now. And I'm like, I don't. There's this idea that homeschool kids stay at home. What? Now, how do they do their taekwondo then? How do they learn cello and violin? How do they take their Korean language classes? I mean, there's just so many things they did that have nothing to do with inside our house. Plus, they worked. I mean, they worked. They had like internships, and they taught other kids, and they worked for a data company, doing data mining and stuff like this. I'm like, guys, that I don't know the model you have of homeschool, but it sounds to me you have like a Benjamin Franklin alone in a room with a candle burning. And I'm like, that's not what homeschool is. Homeschool is literally homeschool. Literally is the wife the mom taking the kids to the grocery store with them, to Costco, and showing them how to do bills. And they're running around Costco learning how to shop and how to stay on budget. That's just one of umpteen zillion tasks you're doing. My kids didn't stay home. They weren't sequestered at home. They interacted, and I will admit one thing. You got one thing on here. They did not interact very much with 13, 14, 15-year-olds because they were in middle school. And my daughters, they skipped that over that. They just went right into high school and it was a homeschool. And so they had nothing with which to relate to their own peer group. So they were constantly hanging out with 19 to 25-year-olds. And so when you look at them and you say, wow, they're really well-adjusted, mature people. Yeah, because they just skipped over the whole public school, middle school BS.
Well, Doc, that Benjamin Franklin one-room cabin with a candle in the corner looks pretty good to some of us parents that have kids in the woke public schools. Just saying, man, you may be convincing some people to go the opposite way.
Hey, Doc, I want to understand, why are your children going to China and working in data mining?
Oh, Pang got them this great Uncle Pang. They work for Uncle Pang. No. They did go to the wall though. And I mean, the Chinese, the Great Wall of China. I don't mean another wall. Anyway, yeah. They got up there, ate some rat and some bat and some cat.
No, it's great to see the world when you're a young kid. I think you did a good thing there, Doc. I think when it comes to schooling your children, you have to do what's best for you. We started out in private school out of necessity to solve a daycare issue, essentially. And then the only reason I took them out of private school is when I moved into my house. I'm 900 meters from a school that at the time is in Loudoun County, which was rated as one of the 3 best school districts in the nation. It's kind of like, wow, why pay for what my taxes are already paying for? And just to sidetrack for a moment, everybody out there worrying about the CRT that Loudoun County's been in the news for, hate to bust everybody's bubble. It's not a new problem. I was dealing with this problem in 2005 and 2006. The commies were already there. And then realized that with the kids in public school, they slowed down and problems began, put them back in private school, problems got solved and went away. Now, homeschooling was never option because my wife and I wouldn't be good at it. You have practical realities. I have to go out and earn a living. I have my company I have to run. My wife's like, homeschooling is not for me. And she's right. It was not the right temperament for her. So private school is an option. And let's be honest, a poor family in a major urban area where they're just trying to make ends meet and make sure they can pay the rent and have enough food by the end of the month, they don't have time to go afford to have a school, to have a parent not working. But what we do have to do is find ways of holding the public schools accountable. And one of the ways that will hold the public schools accountable is by people going to private schools in 2 ways. If those of us that can afford private school avail ourselves of private school, then the public school overcrowding problem will go away. When the public school overcrowding problem goes away, yes, excellent, Bruce. I'll have to tell Henry that next time I see him. If the public schools get a lesser student load, then the teachers are going to be able to give more attention to their students, and from there, the school will improve. On the other hand, we got to be respectful of everybody's ways and means.
All I could say is when my wife, because I'm a single working household. Like my wife is a home, whatever you call them, housewife. Sorry, she's not here right now, so I can get away with saying stuff like that. Domestic engineer, that's what she is. When that COVID shit happened and they were not allowing children to go to the physical location to do school, that killed my wife. I mean, she hated it. And you guys know, you married men out there know that, like, if your wife is unhappy, that is reciprocated to the other partner. Okay, so for my sake, I was ecstatic when the children went back to physical schools. So, anyways, I'm just piggybacking on what Les is saying, that not every family is capable of doing the homeschool thing.
Happy wife, happy life. I want to toss this to Chad and see what he thinks about it. But in terms of public schools, one glimmer of light that we've seen lately is parents going back, kind of taking back to schools a little bit, right? I mean, I guess we can dovetail this in, but at least in some areas, parents are starting to figure out what's going on with this wokeness at the schools, and they're going, no, this is BS. This is not what we want. I think part of the problem is it stems from unions. And unions, it didn't used to be this way, but it is what it is today, particularly with schools. It attracts the woke crowd and perpetuates wokeness. And those woke people become teachers. And then you've got people teaching values to your children that are not your values and are not what you want them being taught, and really are not the place of the school, or not part of education anyway. But some parents, some families, some communities are coming together, realizing this, and are opposing that and bringing that far crazy world that some of those individuals, teachers, are living back into reality. And some of the teachers are getting gone, or at least getting righted on those wrongs as to what they're teaching, that are more their personal beliefs rather than the textbook education that you think your kids are getting in school. So I guess maybe that's a positive thing. I don't know. What do you think about it, Chad? I know I see you sitting there. There was an early comment, Chad, early in the stream, and they're like, Chad is just sitting there. And I think the guy realized what we all realize, is that his gears and that giant brain he's got are turning. And he's like a puma in the dark, crouching, just waiting to pounce on that vulnerable little rat that comes by and thinks that he's going to be all right tonight. Doesn't realize it's the end of his day. So, Chad, go ahead, man. Spring that trap.
Well, I think you're right. We're starting to see a backlash, and the schools is where we're actually seeing most of it at right now. And I think we saw that more than anywhere in Virginia this last gubernatorial election. That was a big issue there, and it turned out the way it turned out, probably because of that. But I don't think you're going to solve the problem. I think unions are going to be around forever, teachers unions especially. I don't think they're going anywhere. They're the largest donors to the Democratic Party, and they're not going anywhere, like I said. But the problem of where these educators are learning their wokeness and stuff like that, it doesn't start in the communities. It starts in college. And as somebody who's spent the past better part of a decade in college and graduate school, especially, I see it everywhere. And I don't think there's any escape. So when Doc's talking about Hillsdale College, for those of you who don't know what Hillsdale is, that's a conservative university. Liberty University is a Christian conservative university in Virginia, very conservative as well. But I don't think we're going to really win this until we take back the colleges. Now, how we do that, I don't know. I don't have the slightest clue. They are bastions of wokeism, Marxism. I think Jonathan Haidt did a survey. 1 in 5 professors identifies as a Marxist. 1 in 5. I mean, holy shit. How do you deal with that? How do you battle that? I don't know. So that's kind of the problem before us right now, especially with the educators, because you got a lot of teachers. And I don't know if you guys spend any time on TikTok, but I've browsed TikTok a time or two, and the teachers, or the people that identify themselves as teachers, are always wearing the rainbow flags, the Black Lives Matter, all this stuff, and just going on there preaching about how they indoctrinate their kids in this stuff. So,
yeah. So I think, so Chad, I would say that the way we take that back is, you first off vote with your feet and vote with your money. Okay, that's the big one. And if you don't have the money, then you have to go in and champion your kid. And frankly, let's just cut to the chase. This isn't everybody, but most of those who say, well, I cannot afford private schooling for my kid, and I refuse to because of financial, they say, well, look, I can't live where I live and not have both of us work. I'm like, okay, well, then if you're both working, you're not going to do the next thing, which is spend your time in the school trying to change the school. So what I'm saying is you either change the school, and the people who have the means to homeschool or private school, they're not going to bother with changing the school. And I don't blame them. I would leave too. Those who stay don't have the time to change the school. So that's our bit of our problem. But I do admit changing the school is an attractive solution. When it comes to the university, we're also saying the same sort of thing. First off, stop buying into the lie that you don't have a career if you don't have a college degree. This is not true at all. It's not even close to true. All right. I've worked in too many government agencies and know that we hire people all day long that don't have any degrees whatsoever. But that doesn't mean they don't have skills. That doesn't mean they don't have experience. They went to trade schools. They learned computer programming. They learned, locks and HVAC and plumbing and, you name it, man. They come from a myriad of places. They learned security and cybersecurity with no degree whatsoever. They may have learned it in another government agency, such as the military. But my point here is we need to stop the lie. Look, when I graduated with my bachelor's degree way back in the day, and yeah, I admit we had just invented teepees at the time, but the point is that there was a survey done just a couple of years old, and it said, and our professor pulled it out and said, look, you're getting ready to graduate here in a couple of weeks. I want to pull this out and have you guys read this. And he shared it with us. And I forget, it was U.S. News World Report or something like that. And it said, of the workforce, only 10% of the workforce had a bachelor's degree. 10%. You know what that is today? It's almost 30%. It's like 28, 29%, something like this. It's 3 times as much. And that's degree inflation, meaning a degree is worth less now. A degree is worth less. So if you're not in a STEM field, looking to work in a STEM field, don't go to college. Don't do this. If you don't need a degree to start working there, go to a trade school. Go to an apprenticeship. Start your own business. Join the military and learn, and go to a school there. There are so many wonderful ways for you to do this until we start shunning the lie, and it is a lie, that you need a degree. And I know this makes me a hypocrite. I know it does. People are like, Doc, you have a few degrees. I know I do. I do. I totally do. But I'm also here to tell you that doesn't make or break you. There are too many people that I work with on a daily basis that don't have any degrees and are brilliant, and they're doing fantastic work, and they're very well compensated for it. So let's stop this lie. And that's how you take back the universities, Chad, is that you make everything except STEM irrelevant and wait till they're begging. By the way, it's not happening anywhere to my knowledge. But I think it's very funny now that women have hit 60% of the population on campus and men are only 40%. No, by the way, half that 40% is in STEM fields, that there aren't enough men in other studies. There are not enough. They're going, wait, how do we get the men in? And they're like, yeah, you don't. Well, the women don't want to be here, other than the lesbians. The women don't want to be here if there aren't men here too. So how do we attract those men? Thank you for that demonstration, Bruce. Now my questions are all answered. But the point is that they're not incentivizing it, but they at least are asking the question, how do we do that? This is just a small metric, and it's a very tiny one, but it's saying, look, you are having that effect now by not going, by saying, wow, I'm going to call BS. I'm not going. Yeah, that's how you take back the universities. By the way, guys, all of this, I want to point out that we shifted gears into education because we said, how do we take back the narrative? How do we take back, our moral high ground? And rather than civil war, rather than, balkanization, rather than all these very unpalatable solutions, the solution is let's fight the long fight. And oh, by the way, the Marxists started in the 1960s in schools. That's where we need to return.
Oh, 100%. The battle is in the schools for one reason. To be generalist here, the conservative side is making babies. The not conservative side is aborting their babies or not having children. So the only way they can get their idea across is in the school, because just simple mathematics will make them irrelevant within a generation. Also, another idea I think that would go a long way towards improving public schools, and I admit this will sound crazy, but let me explain, is by law, you cannot be a teacher unless you're 30 years of age. And here's why. Coming out of college, one of my wife's friends became a teacher, and a couple of years later, we link up with her, and she tells us what a horrible company her husband now works for. It's a horrible company because it's a national uniform company, and between Thanksgiving and New Year's, they are not allowed to take time off, and they only get, gasps, 4 weeks a year off. And he has to go to work when the weather's bad, and he doesn't get the holidays off, except for the 4th of July, Memorial Day, Labor Day. He doesn't get President's Day off. He doesn't get Columbus Day off. And they are the scumbiggest, baggiest companies ever. And the reason she thinks this is she's a teacher. So are her parents and her grandparents. And I thought this was an anomaly, but I'm finding that this is very common among teachers. Most teachers have never lived in the real world. Most teachers have never had a real job. So in their mind, middle of June to middle of August, you're off. You're supposed to be off. If the weather's bad, you don't go to work. And oh yes, you get Columbus Day off. You get President's Day off. You don't have to work on the weekends. And oh, you're backlogged at work. Oh no, we'll tell work not to come to your office so you can have a day to catch up on your work. What other industry functions like that? And that's part of, I think, a big problem with schools is that the teachers have never gone out and lived life.
Pogues function like that.
Right. Exactly my point.
Maybe that's part of the issue of going from high school to a higher level of education, is that then you come out and you get a job with all those perks, which sounds great, but you think those perks are normal. You think those perks are that you're entitled to those perks, and you go your whole life thinking that you're entitled to having 3 months in the summer off and every holiday off and every weekend off and only working first shift. I think it's maybe a good idea. I know I started out, just my story working in what it equates to a landscaping industry, and then I worked third shift for a while. So what I have now, which I have those perks, most of those perks, but I appreciate, and I know that much of the population doesn't have that. I know that there's a third shift. I know that there's guys that work every weekend. I know that there's guys that work every holiday. And I consider myself very blessed and fortunate that I'm not in that situation. And to a point, I kind of earned it. I put in my time when I was younger to where now I'm one of those old dogs, and I can kind of have the weekends off, and I can have the holidays off if I want them off, etc. So I don't know. I mean, what is the old saying, Chad? Hard times make for strong men, good times make for weak men. You guys know what that is. But that applies to every single day of our life, and it applies to the jobs that we take as well. If you grow up with everything being handed to you, or you start out in the workforce with everything being handed to you, you expect it and you don't appreciate it. And that's part of the problem.
No, absolutely. 100%, Bruce.
I want to go back to, obviously we identified issues with the school system, and how do we, retake the school system? So I'm just going to throw this argument out here because I've seen a lot, in dealing with, the wokeness and stuff inside schools nowadays that, there is a big pivot to like homeschool and stuff like that. But if you retreat from that fight, you're conceding that ground to the enemy, right? So then they just reinforce and retake over and completely solidify their position in those schools, and then those never change. So, I'd argue we need more teachers that are, pro-American, freaking, conservative, in nature, traditional American values going into that workforce. And, I'd argue that, hey, we need good kids in the school so that, the woke kids aren't taking over the school, and the woke teachers aren't, teaching at at fucking weapons free with all this crap. Because what do we see? We get conservative kids in these classes that are recording these teachers talking, right? And then you get that audio recording blasted over social media. And that's what brings awareness to this stuff. And then you get those situations like Virginia where the teachers are going to these, meetings and speaking up about this stuff. And then you're getting, new governors in the state of Virginia because of this. So it's like, I would almost say, like, don't pull your kid from those schools. We need good troops on the ground, man. We need conservative teachers going into those fields to teach big lopsidedness. Because they've controlled the schools since the 60s, which I think Doc mentioned.
That's a great point, Brand. I tell you that and it's not just schools; it's in the entire state, and it's on a lot of different issues, right? Conservatives tend to be non-confrontational, and they tend to, when they find themselves in a situation where there's an idea that they don't like and they don't support, to flee from that idea rather than to fight that idea. We simply say, this school district sucks, we're moving. And they pull up and they move somewhere, they do their research, they put their kids in a school that they think is more aligned with their views or values, or they just leave the state. You have a conservative in California and he goes, this state is lost, it sucks, I'm moving to Texas or wherever he's going to go, right? And up and ends his family rather than fight the fight there. And I think maybe California is a good example of a state where it's pretty much so completely lost. And if you look at the voting districts within California, for example, there's tons of conservatives there, but they're not in the high populated areas. And in the high populated areas, in just a matter of, say, 30 years, the pendulum has completely swung from being somewhat middle of the road to being extremely progressive, and progressive policies being everywhere, and those with conservative views feeling like they're completely overwhelmed. And Brent, you're right. Maybe that's an issue that conservatives need to sort of face, and instead of fleeing opposing views whenever they rear their head, fight those opposing views and show them that conservatives make up the majority of the country, and that those conservative views therefore can be defended and can be victorious if we all stand together.
Nah, I mean, I hear you. I do. And there's part of me that wants to lean in and go, yeah, you're right. Let's stick around and fight the good fight. You're asking an 8-year-old and a 15-year-old to stand up to superintendents with PhDs, principals who can punish them, and teachers who are devout Marxists. You're asking 8-year-olds and 15-year-olds to do this, and you're saying, well, they'll exude Christianity. They'll exude, rational thought. They'll be critical thinkers, and this will somehow win them over. Guys, that's lambs to slaughter.
I think I'm more referring to the parents.
Yeah, okay, but
more the parents.
Put the kids in there. So what? So I'm a tax-paying citizen. I can go right here in Alexandria. I can go to the school boards and I can actually, fight that fight. But I wasn't going to stick my kids in there. Are you kidding? My daughters couldn't fight those Marxists. And there's no way. No. Oh, absolutely. They're Marxist, racist, bigoted. They're just god-awful bad people. I mean, they're just horrible people. And they want to be horrible people. So no. They're counter-intellectual. They're literally anti-intellectual. They don't want critical reasoning. Critical reasoning to them is oppression. Of course it is, because anybody who can critically reason would look and say, whoa, dude, what you're pushing here is just absolutely unethical, let alone immoral. And you're wrong. I mean, come on. What 34-year-old master degree holding communist wants a 15-year-old setting them straight? Guys, you don't need to lead your land. Don't put your children as like lambs to slaughter. You want to fight the fight, you go fight it. Don't sick your little 8-year-old on the bullies and say, go get them, little girl. You fight your own fight. And the very first thing you need to do is pull them out. Pull them out. And then well.
I
It's
agree
all
with Doc.
extremely-
They're not there. They can't have power over them. And the less students in the schools, the less power the teachers union will have.
That's true, and that's something that they're worried about. That's the reason unions, teachers unions, fight private school and homeschooling so much, right? I mean, this wasn't really a thing until COVID, and then all of a sudden there was a reason to homeschool. There was a reason to private school, and now you have things where states are starting to take money and say, "Hey, you say get a credit of X amount. You can spend it on your education however you want." And some parents are taking advantage of that and doing homeschooling or doing private schooling. That is a threat to unions who for decades have had a monopoly over the education of your children. I mean, private school for the most part was Catholic school throughout the country. And let's face it, there's plenty of Catholics in this country, but there's a lot of Americans that aren't Catholic. I'm not Catholic. Would I send my child to a Catholic school? I probably would, because I understand what the Catholic school offers, and that it's not just Catholicism, but it's more schooling than it is any particular group of or type of religion. But most people immediately go, "Well, I'm not Catholic, so I'm out." Like that's not even an option for me. But there are other types of schools out there now, private schools that aren't just Catholic, and and there are more options for them. And so I would encourage any family that's out there that's struggling with the stuff that their child is being taught. And I can only imagine, because my daughter just graduated, but she was in a very redneck conservative country school within Texas that you would think would be completely immune from this stuff. And as she was older, she started coming to me with some of these ideas that obviously the teachers, instructors were putting in her head and discussing. And I'm like, oh, this is crazy talk. This is stuff coming out of California and New York. This is straight up, wokeism. But fortunately, and you guys probably remember like I do when we were that age, although it was a long time ago, back when wheels were square and TVs were black and white. But as teenagers, we're rebellious, right? We rebel against everything. And for me, there came a point in time in my life where I said, I'm going to forget everything that my parents ever taught me, everything I ever learned, and I'm going to start making decisions for myself, assumptions for myself based on my own personal life experiences. And I was probably about 13 or 14 when I started this. I found myself coming pretty much right back to where my parents had taken me and agreeing with everything they said. But I was rebellious in that idea. That's when you start talking to your kids, though. That's when it's important that you get involved with your kids. When they're around 13, 14 years old, they really start thinking for themselves. They start coming up with ideas on their own. And you'll know it. They'll come to you with some really stupid ideas that 4 million people before them have come up with, and it didn't work. But their question says, why are things in the world today the way they are? And they think, I can change the world and make it a better place. That's when you start talking to your kids. You really start listening to them, and you start guiding them the direction that they need to go. And that's when you can start wringing the wokeism that was put in them from school out of them and getting them to think for themselves. And hey, that's just parenting tip 101 of Bruce. I gave you that for free.
Hey, Bruce, we'll let,
go ahead, Doc.
I was just going to say, Bruce, your kids are absolutely welcome into any Catholic church, Catholic school, and you are too. But don't touch the holy water. I don't want to leave it, third-degree burns. All right. Otherwise, back to you, Brent.
Thanks so much. I'm Pentecostal. I'll bring my snakes.
I'm just going to say, so maybe it's a better approach. What Bruce brought about the school vouchers and everything. I completely forgot about that. So, instead of a kid being zoned to go to a certain school, the state or the federal government or whatever funds are allocated for your child to go to that school, like you get to choose which school he goes to, and maybe that's how we win the war in the long run in terms of teaching the right stuff, because these kids get pulled out of these woke schools and go to better schools. Via school vouchers and not forced to go to specific ones. And then obviously those little lefty schools lose funding because they lose students. And maybe that's how we retake that ground.
Yeah.
Well, you got the Republican Party that's been talking about doing this for a long time, but really haven't implemented it on a large scale. So I mean, we don't know if it's going to work or not, but I wish the Republicans would get off their ass and actually do what they're saying they're going to do. So you're right.
It does, though, Chad, on a small scale, it does seem to be working really well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the Arizona experiment, because I think that's the first place it's being done statewide with the new law they just passed there. So that'll be interesting in two ways. Interesting if it fails, interesting if it succeeds. Because if it succeeds, other states are going to have to deal with that. You can't deny success. And we'll see if it catches on. If it fails, a lot of states are going to go, ha ha, I told you so.
We can't say, going back to good kids recording some of these teachers that, are saying this crap. We can't throw a perk to COVID, because that is one unexpected benefit to having these kids, have to do their work at home, is it exposed a lot of this stuff, right? Because we had these kids that were forced to be at home having to do online work, and the parents are within earshot and are hearing some of the crap that's being taught, and it's like, oh, excuse me. So it's actually shining a light on some of this stuff. So obviously we always bash on COVID and all the repercussions of what came of that, but that was an unintended benefit from my experience anyways, is people were being able to be privy to the stuff that was going on.
Yeah, and cameras in the school also, right? Cameras in a classroom, typically as a conservative, I oppose having cameras everywhere, but one of the things that it did is it brought the classroom into the living room, and parents can now go back and see what's going on in those classrooms and are like, what the hell is this? And what does this have to do with math? Or what does this have to do with science? Or what does this have to do with English? This is more of an ideological view that my 8-year-old isn't really capable of understanding. And, kids look up to adults, any adult they are. You want your kid to trust your teacher. You trust your teacher with your kid. Think about it, right? Especially really little ones, the teacher may be going to the bathroom with the kid, helping the kid dress, change clothes. We all are parents. We know what kind of issues really young kids have. You trust your kid with that teacher, and that teacher has the best interest of your kid at heart. And so it's really an issue for us when you find out that a teacher has been taking advantage of that and is somehow trying to pervert the mind of the child in a way that you don't agree with. It's just unnecessary. I think teachers should be focused on teaching math, English, science, social studies, and not any of these woke social agendas that are something that we can all address when we're old enough as an adult to form an opinion on.
Yeah, you've been quiet. Chad.
Yeah,
Radio
what's up?
check. Over.
Toss to Chad.
You've been breaking up all night, Brent, man. Every once in a while, you'll start breaking up.
Commies.
I don't really have anything else to add. I think we've solved world hunger.
All right. National divorce is a bad idea. School systems suck. We know the solution. What's the next topic, Brent?
Yeah, we can take on another quick one. What does the chat say, guys? Here's your opportunity to absolutely be a part of the discussion here. Like we said, we read all of your comments, but there's something that you guys want us to take on. Throw some ideas out there. We'll read them, and maybe Brent will pick one of us for us to take on.
I see a lot of joining the military hate. I know we've kind of already had a live stream about this, but maybe we can kind of kick that around.
Well, or tangentially, not so tangentially related. There are people who are saying, what about the government coming in and paying for, education, $10,000 or something like that. Now, if you're talking about university, I would say the reason the university, a principal component, certainly not the only component, but a principal component of why universities are suffering. So in terms of quality, in terms of just everything across the board, in their reputation, trust. And that's because the government keeps getting involved and they keep throwing money at the problem. They started doing this around 1970, and it's just been a fiasco. meaning it's far more expensive now. Even when you adjust for inflation, it's exponentially more expensive. It has not gone up the way it's supposed to be. Much like the cost of health care, right? It's because the government keeps getting involved, and the more the government keeps getting involved, then that throws off the whole capitalism. Not the least of which is because people will take advantage of that. People and corporations will say, "Hey, look, here's free government money. Let's find ways to cheat the system and get that." So there's certainly that system as well. There's the greed and all this, but even so, supply and demand says, wow, if I can charge more and get away with it, I'm going to charge more. And so when the government comes and tries to help us, they're only making sure that the poorest people cannot go. And then if they say, oh, well, I'm going to write that by giving the poorest people money, now you're screwing over the middle. So you can't win here. So my answer to that is no, hell no. Get the government out of education. And in fact, why is there a Department of Education? Why is there a federal Department of Education? Didn't even stand up till 1979. It needs to go away yesterday. Get rid of that thing. Now, all of that to say this. Each county has X amount of money per child. And now if you want to talk about tax credits, I think is how it's usually couched. But what it means is this: if I have $8,000 per child in this county, then I have $8,000 to spend. If it's a wealthier county and I have $13,000, if it's a super wealthy county and I have $22,000 per child, that's great. Now, if you're saying as a taxpayer, particularly, but for that matter, as a parent, I want to pull my kid out of your public school and send them, it's usually called a voucher, and take that money and send to a private school, be it a religious school, be it a science school, be it a, something else, right? Then I'm all about that. And I'll even be fair. Let's say that whatever the public school has, I'm going to grab a nice round number. Let's say $16,000 per kid. I'm going to say the public school, even when you get a voucher, retains 25%. I'll tell you why in a minute. That would mean that 75% of that $16,000, that'd be $12,000, by the way, would go into vouchers for that family to then put that against, oh, I want to send my kid to Catholic school, but it's $18,000 a kid. Well, I've got $12,000 here. I only need to make up $6,000 difference. Why does the public school get to hold on to 25%? And the answer is because they're not going to shrink their building. The building, if your kid doesn't work out in that private school, they're coming right back. They need a desk, they need a chair, they need a computer, they need a building with air conditioning and heat. They need X amount of, at a bare minimum, X amount of teachers. And so I think to be fair, we have to realize that public school will always retain some percentage of the money necessary to teach each kid, but the rest of that should be handed to the parents in a voucher, meaning it's not cash. They can't go buy a car with it. They can't spend it on cocaine or anything else. They can only be spent with schools within your area. And so then you go to those schools and you say, hey, you're the science STEM academy here. What's it cost to get my kid into yours? Here's the voucher and I'll make up the difference. Yeah, if you're talking about something like that, now we can talk. But as for university, the best thing that could happen to America education system is that the government got out of education entirely and shut down the U.S. Department of Education, just closed its doors.
I'm going to jump on you there, Doc, and agree with you for the most part. On the universities, I want one more form of government involvement one more time. Seize the endowments. Here's why. I have a friend whose wife works at a major university here in the state of Virginia. 1% of the revenue the school takes in is tuition. So the kid, nobody has to pay. So any organization in the world can absorb a 1% hit. So students shouldn't even happen to pay. So the massive debt people are getting saddled with is a scam. 2, Harvard, off its endowments, makes enough money that at the current rate, the interest would pay for every student going to Harvard in perpetuity. So the government can just seize the endowments to pay all the students back if they want to pay them back, because the schools aren't doing anything with them. As far as the public schools, I agree with you in concept, but the school doesn't get to keep 25% of the voucher. Why? Because a public school is also a public shelter. It's the storm shelter in case of disaster. It's the fallout shelter. No, that can be taken out of some other. Paying for the building can be a county building and paid from a different fund. The education number should be strictly for the education of the child. And I know that's kind of splitting hairs, but that's where I'm going to slightly disagree with you there.
Well, and I'll disagree with you that the government should seize those endowments. I like where you're going with that, but anytime the government gets involved with money, the government, seized because of tax evasion back in the 70s, seized a whorehouse, and it failed to run. If a government cannot run a prostitution ring, there's no way I trust them with endowments no. I get where you're going, and I agree with you. Just don't get the government involved, okay? They're just notoriously bad.
And don't seize it, just make it illegal for them to charge a tuition if they have a certain amount of endowment. Something. But like for the major university, state university in the state, where only 1% of its income is the tuition, then they don't need to be charging tuition.
All right, guys. Hey, we got less than 15 mics left before we hit the hour mark. So I'm going to go around a horn, just final thoughts. And everybody here except for Chad has their own YouTube channel. Actually neglected to do an intro. So my apologies. But I would like you guys to just talk about what's coming down the pipe in terms of your own YouTube channel at the end of your final thoughts. So we'll just kick it over to Les. Pick it up, man. We'll go around the horn.
All right. Well, we start off tonight talking about national divorce. We all quickly decided it's not an idea that's going to work, and that the real battleground is the educational system. My advice to you, if you have children in school, as I said earlier tonight, spend your money now. Don't waste time saving money for college. If they need to go to college, and the proof you need to go to college is if you can't get somebody else to pay for it, you don't need to go. Forget about college. Just spend your money now. Get well-rounded, well-educated kids, and they'll do just fine. As for what's coming up on my channel, I'm getting ready to head back to Finland and cover the match at Finnish Brutality. Also be having more gear reviews coming out after that. And of course, good One Shepherd coverage.
All right, so national divorce, nope. It won't work, and it will most likely end in civil war anyways. How do we solve this? I think the federal government is too big and needs to be taken down a peg or two. As I said, it seems every presidential or midterm election, it's a mad dash for power by both political parties so they can cudgel the other side. I really think we need to let the libertarians have their chance at the federal government and just hopefully tear it the hell down. As for education, it's going to be a long, hard road, but I think we're seeing, like Bruce said, we're starting to see a backlash, at least at the smaller level, the elementary school level. And we're going to see how well that backlash is going to play out, at least by the midterm elections.
All right. So in terms of national divorce, civil war, whatever, no, I say no. Everybody's too comfortable. There's too many micro factions out there for us to really agree on anything. We really can't agree on anything. I mean, you can go to YouTube and you can find 20 different ways to make a Spam sandwich. It's just we're Americans. We're extremely diverse. That's a strength and that's a weakness. And when it comes to coming together to form some type of force to defeat evil, it's a weakness. Because we're just not very good at it. In terms of our kids in our school, parents, be involved in your local school districts, get vocal, send out emails. They do matter over time. And when your kids become that age that they're very impressionable and looking for answers, the teenage age, be involved with them, talk to them, and help guide them. You can't force them, but you can help guide them to the truth and to the right ways. And that's one of your biggest jobs as an American is to be a good parent, because you are ultimately the teacher that they're going to learn from and the one that they're going to remember long after you're dead and gone. So yeah, that's That's my thought on it. I'm just like you guys. I'm just learning and watching this whole thing unfold as we go. But I feel that yeah, that's probably some good advice. Oh, and for those of you, every now and then these comments come up. I meant to address it earlier, but you guys are like, this, talking about things and discussing things and getting information out there and voting is all lost. It's time to fight. Well, we monitor that too. We have our finger on the pulse of a nation, and I'm telling you that when that becomes the time, I've been watching it my entire life. You won't see us here, so you won't have to tell us not to talk about it and to go and enact some kind of action. We'll already be there. Just keep that in mind. I don't think the country is ready for that yet. Again, everybody's far too comfortable to make any real action. When I mean everybody, I mean the country as a whole. So when we get there, but we're not there yet. And when we do, you'll know, because we don't have that out of office message going on YouTube.
So I want to recognize that the emotional sentiment of a national divorce is, I'm sympathetic to it. I actually am. When you listen to the narratives at a national level, it's this side versus that side. And you can categorize those any way you want. But I mean, the polarity is generally, Marxist ideology versus corporatism and nationalistic corporatism. And so I get that if you look at it on a national level and you go, wow, we really do need a divorce. It's easy to conclude that. As soon as you step down from that yellow press, yellow journalism propaganda, and you start looking at the issues that suffer, or that plague each state, and how different that is from one state to the other, as well as each county, you start to realize it's not a black and white, a yes and no, a this and that dichotomy. It just isn't. There are, 300 different ways we can come at this. And so you then realize, creating, two utopias doesn't exist. And very likely trying to create 50 minor utopias doesn't exist. And you inevitably come to, if you play this war game, so to speak, through your head, you will quickly come to the conclusion that this balkanization of America will fall either from internal conflict, that is, internal wars across, or it will fall to external forces, or very likely a combination of both. It isn't going to work. And so we say, all right, emotionally, I get it. Intellectually, this isn't going to work. And then also, I will draw you back and say, pay attention to those groups that are saying, no, we need to do this, because what they're doing is they're seeking the chaos whereby they get to be the tyrant, right? Where they become this demigod cult of personality and everybody circles around them. What I'm saying is they're nefariously seeking power, and they're not actually offering real solutions. And so, okay, back off. Then what are the solutions? Well, they're myriad. There's a lot of solutions. There's solutions to dog catcher problems, and to, recycling problems, and to, air quality problems, and everything else. Okay. But I think when you really look at where you have to start, there's an old adage, something about if you want to eat, grow rice. If you want shade, grow trees. And what I mean by that is we have to start now on future generations. We have to realize that our most powerful play is to educate our children in the ways that are suitable to our value systems. And the way you're going to do that is, one way or another, you become steeply involved in education. Whether that means you like your public school well enough that you go to PTA and council meetings and you vocalize repeatedly, not once, you're just there. That's part of your responsibility now, is to show up to every one of these and vocalize, form committees, political action committees with like-minded parents, and you push this forever and ever, amen. And you will have success in the long run, meaning you may not win every battle, but you'll get there. The other way is to vote with your feet, vote with your money, and that is to pick up and leave. And this also has a more immediate, often a more immediate and a more appealing, because you're not forcing your children to fight your wars. You're fighting your own wars, and you're bringing your children into your kitchen, and you're saying, hey, I can homeschool you here, and I can get you involved with the community and businesses. I can get you involved in camps and, and music and sports, and you will socialize, and I can teach you the value here. Or you can go, that's the other end, you can go a middle road and say, well, I'm going to find a private school. In any way, what you have to do is realize we're in this for the long haul, and one way or another, the solution is get involved with your kids. Be part of your kids' life and be part of their education. And I think that's the solution moving forward. And oh, by the way, it just happens, this solution just happens to come with less violence, right? Greater ethics. And it's a peaceful solution that ultimately says, hey, we're a nation of individuals. We value individualism, and I can teach that and I can work with that inside of my own household.
What you got coming down the pipe in your channel, Doc?
Dang it, I was proselytizing. Follow me. Thank you, brother. All right. Anyway, yes, sorry. So I've had a new book out, by the way. It is the OPT4 Smart Book 5, Irregular and Hybrid Threats. So this is irregular warfare. And so that's just come out with a whole slew of the OPT4 series. I already authored OPT4 3, Red Team Armies. So this is my latest, greatest. And you know what I'm going to be covering? I got a couple of videos in the pipe right now, but very, very soon, really by probably early October, if not before then, I'll be working and producing OPT4 videos on my channel. So we're going to be talking tactics, culture, life cycles of how the enemy fights. And I'm going to do that for the rest of the fall and probably well into the winter. So look for more of that. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Doc. So in terms of national divorce, I'm opposed to that. And let me also say that if my audio is breaking up, I apologize, guys. Apparently the communists have been hacking my stuff and trying to disrupt my signal here. But in any event, we talked about this first half of the video. That's what this was all supposed to be about. And I just don't see that as a viable solution, given what we were talking about. How the makeup of everybody, it's not clearly defined states, right? So you have counties that are red, then you have heavily populated metropolitan areas that are heavily blue. It's just not clear cut, and I just don't think it's a viable option. And if it were to happen, I don't see how it could happen without resorting to armed aggression and just devolving into a civil war. I don't see that's happening, guys. And like I said earlier, the only winner in that situation is communist China, because they are the next ones on the totem pole. And I don't give a shit what anybody says. We ain't communist China yet. There might be states that are heading that direction, but they ain't there yet. And I don't want to see the freaking PRC's flag raising over the United States anytime soon, or at all for that matter. So I'm 100% keeping us unified and winning the war, the social war here in the States, and eventually the nation, getting us back on track. So whatever that entails. Obviously, we've had some great discussions about education tonight. How do we retake the school systems? Because the left has taken over the school systems going back to at least the 1960s, and they've deeply ingrained themselves there. So how do we win that war? Because that's going to be a long haul. That's not going to be a short-term victory. Nonetheless, guys, coming down the pipe for my channel tomorrow, I'm going to release the One Shepherd 40th anniversary Bravo Company spring semester 2022 FTX video. I released the STX video earlier, a week or so ago. Now I'm going to have the FTX coverage video coming out tomorrow, so you guys can tune in for that. And then, as always, guys, got live streams coming up. And then Bruce and I have been working on for a long time the Mac VSOG freaking gear video, and that will be coming down the pipe in due time. We still got a video the gear portion of that video, but we know that's going to be a big one. So we want to do it right. And there's still a few extra things that we got to pick up before we complete that ensemble to put that together. But that will be a big video coming down the pipe. So nonetheless, guys, it's been a great discussion. Does anybody have any saved rounds before we close it out? No?
Fuck Trudeau.
All right, guys. Have a good night.